What is going on, everyone? How are you doing today? We've got kind of an interesting, different episode today. I've wanted to make it a little more casual to discuss with some of the thought leaders in the space, some new things that are coming out in the news, and have us kind of like break it down back and forth so that if you are looking at it or hear about it, we can kind of provide some of that synthesis for you so it doesn't seem so like scary or out there. So I'm lucky today to have Brandon, who is the global crypto lead at Dept, to join me and help kind of look through some of the things from Co-Create. Brandon, what's going on, man?
Yeah, hi. I'm Brandon, and as you mentioned, I'm from Dept. Dept is a global agency. I'm based in the Northeast, so I'm just north of Boston. When I say a global agency like that, I mean they do stuff from end to end. What we focus on in the group that I work in is much more of the technical delivery of these products. And so when it says global crypto lead, even though that's a very vague title, it basically means that I'm responsible for getting a lot of these projects from start to finish in terms of staffing, scoping, making sure we actually are taking on projects that are smart and not just cash grabs, and that they're doable and buildable. And we've seen a lot of the hype drive a lot of terrible ideas, so we try to avoid those and help do a lot of that too. So I get to move more at the higher level these days, even though I used to code for a very long time, and I still do that on the side. So I love reading into these things technically and talking about them ad nauseum. So I'll try not to go down too many deep technical rabbit holes, but I am excited to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for hopping on the day. I mean, you brought up, I think, a great transition line in this around doing projects responsibly and ones that aren't just a cash grab, which I think leads us somewhat to our topic for today, which is this idea of the protocol, also known as Co-Create, that I'm sure that any of the people watching, if you're into the Web3 space, have seen some buzz about, right? So A16Z came out, the headline, right? 25 million, more millions raised for this NFT focused protocol with, I think, Vanier Fund. So Gary's in there, Patrick McCormick's, FTX, Artifact, a number of them into this. But I mean, so first glance, your thoughts on what Co-Create's doing.
Yeah, I would even say if you looked first at just the investment, not even the amount, but the people behind them, I actually do really respect a lot of A16Z's approach, some of their investments. I don't personally love Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm curious to see where they go with their fund. I mean, I just think he's always been a loud guy. Let's just put it that way. I mean, that's kind of his thing.
Yeah.
Maybe not my cup of tea. But in terms of what Co-Create's doing, yeah, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I mean, it makes a ton of sense for what people are trying to do in this entire space anyway. We talk about decentralization and community and having this sense of utility tied to NFTs as opposed to just having collectibles, and they're checking all those boxes. I think it'll go. I'm interested to see how some of the base protocol fleshes out in terms of what some of these small fees turn into. But it seems like they're pretty open to even allowing the DAO themselves be governed by people who are owning the native token of the DAO, and so Co-Create being able to allow other people to make DAOs on top of the protocol in a more easy and streamlined fashion is fantastic. I think a lot of people are hesitant to get into the space right now. We've seen a lot of people make mistakes. I don't know if you've seen the website. Web3 is going just great. Is that what it is? Web3 is going great.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's hilarious. I mean, it's a nice like satirical look at it, but there have been a lot of mistakes, and I think when people can rely on systems like this, it makes them much more I guess it puts away their fears, and it's much easier to get into the space when you don't necessarily have as many questions and you can rely on something that's been a little more battle tested.
Right.
I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, so like the TLDR, right, of Co-Create is that they're wanting to make it much more like standardized while adding some level of incentive drivers so that whenever an NFT community or project wants to launch, it makes a lot of like the boilerplate smart contract stuff kind of all there. And it's all, like you said, battle tested. That way you don't run into issues. Like I've been a part of a couple NFT communities where they try to do, they try to do staking, and turns out that the contract was messed up, and now they're like in this whole very weird predicament. Or they try to do, tokens, and it just goes sideways. So Co-Create's there to really kind of offer this bit of like, I don't know if I like hate the word turnkey, but like this kind of like turnkey NFT.
Getting closer, yeah.
It's getting closer. It's getting closer. But if we look at it like something that's interesting, like first of all, their site's cool. And a lot of the research that I started doing into them was kind of like, first of all, like their Medium post, right?
Yep.
from the founder that, seems to be like a common thread nowadays around them kind of giving a synopsis of what they do. But I think she, Tara says it well, that Co-Create provides the foundational infrastructure for decentralized brands of the future. And it's the protocol and tooling to support these communities to achieving their full potential. Now, what I always wonder about this, and I was talking to someone in the art community, was, when you make things like this easier, like NFTs with a button, and you remove some of that difficulty and like investment and commitment that it took to create some of these, like, do you think that makes it like better or worse for people to just all of a sudden be like, oh, I can WordPress my NFT project, and next thing you know, we've got all kinds of stuff, which I guess you kind of.
I mean, now. Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny you mentioned WordPress. That was actually going to be the analogy I used, was the sort of blogging revolution. Maybe we started with those HTML pages in Web 1, and but now then we get like Tumblr and WordPress and whatnot. It makes it a lot easier to just be like, out there.
The old GeoCity sites back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think I still have a what was that, tripod site up there somewhere.
Yeah.
Hotbot was my search engine of choice back then. It was great. It was so simple. Yeah, we saw that big change come with the writing of content, and then it became content is king, and we see that now even with video and whatnot. Video is a little more ubiquitous. You're using a video setup that's, again, super jealous, but it's much more streamlined than it used to be. That used to be like, I need a satellite truck and like big cameras and green screens and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's definitely gotten easier. And these, like this, I love decentralization and transparency. Those are like the two flags I wave all the time. So this stuff is right up my alley. And so when we see these projects making it easier, maybe even, it might not be turnkey, but at least it goes over the hard stuff so much easier. It's like it smooths out all those bumps for people to get involved. And I think that's great. I love that. And I love that it's backed by a protocol. Or I shouldn't say backed by a protocol. It is a protocol. And so instead of it just being something like, and I'm going to call ourselves out here. So Dept, we put out an open source project called AlgoMart. Is on top of the Algorand blockchain. It's an NFT marketplace. And even that's a little more toward the turnkey kind of thing, where it's like, you can set it up and have your own version of it, but you're basically siloed at that point. That's your marketplace. You're doing your own thing. This is really, an entire community driven around the protocol itself. And I like seeing that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that idea of building like larger, using it as a protocol or as a backing foundation that allows you to like build something larger outside of just the independent community itself. I think is really, really fascinating. The other thing that I saw a lot, and if we want to start jumping into just kind of like, kind of walking through their white paper somewhat, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I don't know if this might be backwards for you, so I apologize.
Oh, no, it looks good. Yep.
Okay, cool. They outline some of the problems that NFT projects have today, right? And I agree with all of these, is that, as decentralized as it is, the teams that are running it and are accountable for it are still very much centralized, right? It still is your anonymous team. And the incentive models on how you keep that train rolling is pretty difficult in NFT communities today, right? Like everyone's just basically in there, like hyping everyone, like sweep the floor just over and over and over. And then eventually that kind of like burns out, and it's like, what is the next, how do we keep them going more? Maybe we do some merch, maybe we do something else.
Yeah. That Guy Osiri, he was an agent he worked with Madonna way back in the 90s and was in the music industry for a long time, and I think it ran Maverick Records or something like that. But he was the guy behind a bunch of those brilliant marketing things they did in the music space. And he's also the guy behind Yuga Labs in that regard. So you can see a connection between all the different celebrities there, but he is like a hype machine. He's good. Mm-hmm. And you nailed it, because remember they were anonymous at one point, and then they got doxxed, and we found out who they were, and that was kind of part of the mystery.
That was part of the mystery.
Not anymore, but the hype continues.
Right.
Now we got ApeCoin and this new metaverse that's coming out, so they're good at timing those things, almost like a Kim Kardashian staying in the news cycle or something.
Right. Do you think from their hype machine, do you think that it was a planned dox?
I hope not, because why would you leak it to BuzzFeed? I feel like you would go to maybe something a little more reputable, or maybe in the space. But they probably didn't even want to be known. I mean, it'd be a lot cooler to collect a bunch of money and be able to walk around for the rest of your life and never be known.
That's true. Just have a nice cool Bored Ape thing tattooed on your arm, then everyone's like, oh my gosh, are you just you're a fanboy. It's like, actually,
Actually, yeah, I'm the original
some
fanboy.
as a matter of fact, and
Yeah.
then run. Yeah, I did read a super interesting article on the woman who helped design the artwork behind it, which was fascinating.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'll have to throw a link out for it. I can't remember all of it now. But I mean, so jumping back into here, like the other interesting thing that I found about Co-Create is, and I think you might have mentioned it somewhat earlier, is how they. Maybe I'll like increase the size of some of this, right? There you go. Is that it's this idea of creating, and it's somewhat in the name, but being able to provide like I see it as like the NFT projects today, like they are very isolated, right? Like of course you have like some collabs between projects, but there's not much there in the way of incentivizing like the NFT community as a whole. So when projects succeed, there is some level of value back to everyone beyond just those, right? And it seems that one of the big cornerstones that the Co-Create thing or the Co-Create protocol is putting into place is being able to create this kind of like upside back to the core protocol itself. So there's 4 features to the Create protocol: how you mint the NFT, the native utility and governance token, a DAO, and a treasury, right? And if I read this right, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's kind of like the Co-Create umbrella DAO, right? And then
Yep.
projects that launch using the Co-Create protocol are kind of all underneath that. And when those projects have success, they have tokens that pass up to the umbrella DAO, right? And then people can be owners of the umbrella DAO or the Co-Create DAO, as well as participants underneath. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think it's on page 7. It says that, those exchanges, what is it? Rather than retaining 100% they retain most and sends a small amount to the Co-Create treasury. So that's basically minus the small protocol fee. So there is a protocol fee that goes up to the umbrella to basically feed into that treasury so that people who are owning the Co-Create native token can use that treasury as they need.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like a DAO of DAOs.
It's a DAO.
It's like a Russian nesting doll.
Yeah, right.
But it's interesting. Yeah, they in a few places here, and it's worth calling out some lingo because it took me a minute to understand what they meant by client. But they say the creator, the purchaser, the protocol, and the client. So the creator would be the person who creates the NFT. The purchaser of the NFT, the person buying the NFT. The protocol is the Co-Create protocol. And then the client is the actual person who builds the app, right? So if I wanted to build a business or an application or something on top of Co-Create protocol, I would be the client in this case. So each one of those people can get a split. And they have a default split, but you can set what that split is. I assume you can't change the small fee that goes to the protocol because it's probably a fixed thing, but that makes sense.
Right.
But it does seem like they can be very flexible in that other, 4-way split.
Yeah, and what I thought was really cool about that split is they give some great examples in that you can basically drive different incentive behaviors on how you set up that split, right? And they give a good one here around, basically, it'd be useful to have an incentive mechanism by which developers would benefit from making games that require the collection of NFTs. So you can set up a split that basically incentivizes people to, participate in the game, leveraging those. And then if you're wanting to build something like a marketplace where, it's really more around, providing a lot of money back to the creator, you can set up a split that goes this way. And then so how you kind of like tweak those dials and those knobs, you can drive a lot of like user behavior, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's funny. When I read through those examples the first time, I was like, oh, it's cool that they added some examples to the white paper, I guess. But I didn't even think about the fact that they were focusing on check out what those 4-way splits can get you in terms of an economic driver.
Yeah, and what's funny is that I thought like the exact same thing that when I first read through it. I was like,
Yeah.
they have an entire section on just use cases. Like, did they write the core and they were like, you know what, we need this to be a couple more pages.
Can I double space this and make it 14 font, like that kind of thing? That's what I was thinking at first.
You know what? Also, is that I don't know who came up and said, you know what, for white papers, like we're just totally going to say screw the margin. Like,
yeah, who needs that?
Your typical margins? No. We're gonna triple.
I've seen white papers before where they're like the margin has nice little notes in it and handy little things that might be like aid the white paper as you go. I like those.
Yeah. No, I'm all down for those. But yeah, whoever came up with this, if this was all the way there. I don't know, but
Probably the same people who think that like PDF menus on your phone are great and roll a pinch and zooming.
yes, those are crazy. Now I'm thinking about it. Yeah, and so I do think that's one of the more kind of like interesting things about this co-create is, I tried to dig out my my, my discrete math book from back in the day,
Yeah.
to figure out exactly what's going on here. But I mean, it totally makes sense. But this idea of, how they do staking, because again, as we said before, it's a DAO of DAOs, right? And that whenever you launch if you want to launch your new NFT token, and you use the co-create protocol, you kind of get this DAO structure that goes with it so that you can have community ownership of the NFTs. But then also that top level DAO, you can also buy into and have influence on the co-create protocol itself. And in order to do that kind of responsibly is that you need to have kind of like different ways to handle this voting. And it does seem that they have some of that, that kind of baked in here. I mean, I don't know if this goes probably as in depth as I would like it to, but I think it does kind of make sense.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different formats you could do for how you handle a vote anyway. I like this one. It's the normal one. Yeah. I do like that they put the math in there. I feel like anyone who like puts math in these white papers gets automatic credibility, even if you're just skimming it with your eyes. Like, oh, they got math in there. I mean, it's like, so they must know what they're talking about. I was skimming through the basic attention token white paper, and it was the same thing. There's like a lot of economic math, but what's funny about that is that he's like calling out the bad math from other projects. So I was like, that's kind of a funny place to put that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, these are just like different ideas of like how you could handle voting. I mean, it could be a simpler just majority vote, right? It could be a really basic thing if you wanted it to be. I was also thinking when we were going through this, there's nothing in here that forces someone to not be a jerk, right? You could have someone who basically when they go live or whenever they do the mint, whenever those NFTs become available, that they get hoarded by, maybe it's fake wallets or whatever, but they get hoarded by the creators of the project, and maybe people wouldn't be able to realize that, so that they could just effectively swing the vote as they wanted to. It'll be interesting to see how we surface some of that transparency as these projects come up.
Yeah, no, I honestly didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
And just to be clear, I'm not like necessarily calling out co-create on this. This is a problem
No.
that exists today. It's just that will co-create have a way to help solve the problem is really more the question.
Yeah, that is. We're talking about the human condition now, right?
Yeah. Well, it's true. All the people we've talked, or we at Dept have talked to so far, who are really getting involved in this space in like a big way. Like, I have an investment. We're a startup. Let's go do this thing. They're tackling one piece of a larger puzzle. Like, hey, if we build all these gears, eventually they'll all work well together. And this is we were talking about that turnkey kind of solution. Like, this is a bigger cog of the wheel, which is great. But at the same time, I think that we're going to see that sort of focus for a little while of, I'm going to make this piece. I'm not going to necessarily care about enforcing it or the analytics around all that stuff of like what the wallets hold and who holds them and how often they're transferred. Those are nice tools that you can have on top of these things, but it doesn't necessarily have to be there today. And so I always remind people we're very early on, and I point out stuff like that where like these projects are focused and small and they're interoperable. We're in the sense that we'll be able to pull them together and get a lot of, like, let's say it was elliptic, or is it elliptical, or it's elliptic, or Chainalysis or something. Like, maybe they offer a consumer product and you can bolt that into a co-create based project later on. So those are two different companies. Same way we do SaaS products today, just that we don't have enough of them yet for in the Web3 world.
Yeah, no, and like that's, I think, was like a weird that whole idea. So I was doing a lot of like work in the fintech space, right? And this whole concept of like unbundling the bank was like a huge thing around it. Like I remember that I had there was like an infographic, right, of like the Wells Fargo bank page, and then there was like 150 smaller companies that are basically doing all of these like small services around that. And I feel like we see that a lot in Web3, where you can like bolt all of this stuff together and get something really, really cool at the end of it. And I think that pulling stuff into the co-create protocol and having it act as that like bottom layer that is able to help kind of like incentivize communities to expand beyond just the collection itself is going to be really cool.
And 25 million will take them to an interesting runway where they'll have built something pretty cool. They'll have a sizable team without it being over bloated. You know, they'll have to like really consider their runway and how they spend it. And that'll probably get them for like a year and a half, is my guess. Maybe a couple years if they're smart. Marketing is always a problem, but
yeah.
that's it'll be really interesting to see what they'll have on the roadmap so that they can get that next round of funding.
Yeah, and that's I've always felt like it's such an interesting like conundrum, and I think we addressed like some of it in like as we were talking earlier around this idea that a lot of these projects and you know some of these companies like to get the the consumption of it high enough, quick enough that they dump a lot of like I would imagine a lot of that 25 mil is going to go into marketing, right? Like
marketing and salaries. Yep.
Marketing and salaries, and you know you go to these conferences and like I've seen some of the sponsorship packages and it's like
I've seen some of the tickets.
Just the yeah, just
if you want to bring 10 people to your company to one of these things, like you're gonna drop some serious cash.
Yeah, I was looking at
South
Consensus.
Beach is not cheap.
No, it was like $1,500 a ticket. I was like, wow, maybe not today, but even that, like you were looking at sponsorship packages too, and it's to be on a 10-minute panel with 4 other people, it's like 10 grand a person. I'm like, well, it's 10 minutes. There's 5 people and get through intros, and there you go. Burn.
Turns out that running conferences is actually a very lucrative business in itself if you know what you're doing. So, I mean, way to capitalize on the hype and have a bunch of conferences at the same time. But now they're starting to congregate in those areas that are like, hey, Miami, that's like a crypto-friendly place. Let's also go to the Bahamas. And you don't see like anyone hanging out in. Is it Montana that has the DAO? No, it's Wyoming that has like the DAO structure around it. Like no one's like, let's go to Wyoming and have a conference. Like you don't see that happening.
Yeah, no, I went down to a conference in Miami that was right on the heels of Bitcoin Miami.
Yep.
And it was hyped up there. Yeah, you should come. It was an entire conference. Imagine set up with like 6 people there.
Whoa.
It was
awkward.
It was awkward and eerie, and it led me to believe that like these people are just pumping out these conferences, left, right, and center. Like there's not much thought going into it, but it was
not a great time slot either. It's like what's on after the Super Bowl. Like no one knows.
Yeah, and it's you just had people in here for for NFT Miami week, and then you had them there for Bitcoin 2020. Like, do you just expect people to stay in Miami for 3 weeks straight? Like, come on.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is very exhausting. So
Miami's like a Vegas thing for me. It's like a 2 nights max.
Yeah, two nights in and out. Yeah, what's funny is I've been down there a bunch now and still never been to the beach.
Okay.
Mostly stay at the nice little Hampton Inn by the airport with the conferences back out.
Yeah, well, I went to one that was on the beach because I knew that's where all these like mucky mucks were staying, and I was like, well, I'll hit the hotel bar and schmooze my way in, learn some stuff that I wouldn't learn otherwise. Like have a couple drinks. Hey, I got a question for you. That kind of thing. It actually did work out. It's like oddly enough that Scooby-Doo kind of crap worked. So,
no way.
It did, but it was very expensive. The whole trip was insanely expensive, and I also only saw the beach for about 30 seconds. So I was right there and still didn't get out there.
One of these days we're gonna just do like where one of the conference days is just like a take time for yourself. That way. That way we can go out to the beach. I don't know. Maybe not. I did go to one, and were you at ETH Denver?
No, I should go to that one though.
There was a really cool party that was super chill in like this really old house. I think that funny enough, the Bored Apes had put on that I kind of Scooby-Dooed my way into as well. I'm supposed to be here.
Press. Cool.
Press. Yeah. Can you give me one? But looping back to create like really like tactically, right, that I do think is interesting, and they even say it in here, is that it's just the same set of smart contracts with different parameters. So it's that kind of like you can plug it in. I don't know what the interface is going to look like, and then depending on how much money, if we see them as the marquee sponsor at the next giant crypto thing, they may not have a great admin portal because all their money will be spent there. But if they do, I could kind of see this like nice kind of configurable way to like set up and deploy these smart contracts that allow you to really get a lot of this up and rolling. And they mentioned like Uniswap a lot in this, right?
Yeah.
Which was
I can't tell if it was like I don't want to say it's a cop out. It's like we're just gonna follow that same path because it's like it's paved and they did like a few things right.
and it like, is that a bad thing? I mean, if you
Yeah.
find the one that works, like go for it. But it's that idea of like this factory method, which I saw, I saw like co-create factory and factory method like referenced a lot, like in other like articles and stuff. And at the end of the day, like I'm super excited to see what these smart contracts are. Like it kind of, it gives me like very like open Zeppelin vibes, right? It's like
Yeah.
they're taking like they're basically taking open Zeppelin stuff that's open source and saying we'll put like a nice little, front end on it so you can tweak your 4 parameters and hit go, and then you get it, which
Yeah, like Open Zeppelin has, they should put it like on the front of their pages, but like they have a wizard in their docs somewhere
mm-hmm,
buried in there, and it's a hey, you want it to be mintable? Do you want it to be updatable? Do you want it to be follow certain specs? Like you kind of just pick and choose these radio buttons in the wizard, and it kind of shows you the source code that you would want to use for that smart contract. And now it's still up to you to take it, compile it, get it up there and going. So there's a lot to be done after that. And they're also not sort of validating the contract either. They're saying, here's a good jumping off point for you. And so this is like the next step beyond that. So I totally agree with the analogy. It's spot on. It's almost like they're checking the right boxes for you behind the
mm-hmm.
scenes in that wizard and then giving you that, like the factory method, meaning like it can crank out the same thing. Like I can make a car at Ford over and over. They all look the same. It's got a bunch of moving parts that interoperate, but each Ford looks just like the other one and basically everywhere except for the paint color on the outside. And that's basically what this factory method is like for co-create. And if they can really nail that, man, this is going to be a big thing. It just opens the doors for so many people. I can think
It
of
does.
like 2, I can't name the customers, but I can think of 2 right away that'll be a fantastic fit for this.
And I think the biggest upside too is really being able to, by having that stuff that's already been vetted, is like protecting, the end customer, right? Like the retail investor. And like, as we're continuously pushing and saying, I think that we're aligned on the philosophy around like, driving mass market adoption of blockchain tech, is that we have to do it responsibly, and like being able to provide, even if we can't control the types of projects, nor I think do we want to control the types of projects to go out there, whether they're, good or bad and, very objective, points of view, but being able to at least provide safe tech underneath it,
Yep.
I think is the biggest thing.
I actually like that we're at that stage still. I feel the same way where it's like, for good or bad, it's going to be community centered around things that, people will share together. And, the stifling of voices or whatever, that can come later from someone else. Again, I'm focusing on smaller parts and kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, just like everyone else in these spaces. But I mean, it'll come later. But right now we're building these tech pieces that allow this stuff to happen. And it's a really exciting time to be in this space. I mean, we go back to the cash grab thing. So when we first started talking to a bunch of customers in the space, and I definitely won't name these, they had a lot of that cash grab mentality. We have JPEGs. We're sitting on mountains of them. Let's make some.
Right.
And then let's sell them. And they didn't do well. And I think what happened is a lot of people hit that same thing in that Gartner hype cycle at the peak of inflated expectations about what they were doing. And now everyone's sort of in that trough of disillusionment. But a lot of brands were sort of hanging back and watching and reading and learning during that time. And what we've seen are bigger brands now, which is surprising, some of them, come forward and say like, okay, we're ready to go be a little bit more serious in this space, but take this sort of DAO mentality, even though it won't be a proper DAO because they're like existing organizations where they can't do that. They can do that in some respect. And so we're starting to see more people do that, or at least want to do that, which is why I'm saying like I can already think of a couple that would benefit from something like this, where they could rely on it being a little more reliable, turnkey. We keep using that word, but we'll come up with better ones. Yeah, reliable is a good one because if it's consistent, it's a paved road. You said they mentioned Uniswap many times in the white paper, and that's true. Uniswap did do a great job of helping out in that regard, and I think that Co-Create will help out in this regard, pave the path a little further.
I agree. Yeah, no, totally. And that's, I mean, you make a great point. We're seeing the same thing on our end, right? Is that these big brands that, sat back, watched, learned, understood what not to do, and get in there now and start adopting, because, I talk to a lot of them and I'm like, look, the metaverse, whatever that ends up being, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg's goggles or that's something else, right? Like whatever that technology shift is going to happen. It's already happening, right? And the big thing about getting in now is being able to educate your customers so that in 5 years from now, when it is a big shift and you start really getting new wealth and new money into the market, and you want to target those audiences that you're able to. And it's been fascinating too. Like I will say that I have like hats off to like Adidas and some of them that have like done like some pretty cool things that are way outside of making shoes,
Yeah.
to kind of pave some of the way for it. And you mentioned something too around where it's not being able to leverage like kind of like a DAO-ish model, right? In this kind of like almost like hybrid-ish,
Yeah.
hybrid DAO, which I think is going to be a big area of the future. But what I do think is interesting, I'm kind of curious where like co-create DAO, like the DAO, the umbrella DAO, is going to go, because they mentioned that, so whenever a new project launches using the co-create protocol, one of the things that comes, as part of the package is this idea of, an ERC20 token that are part of the community, and that when those get issued, part of them goes back to the co-create DAO at the top, and then the project itself maintains some of them. And I thought this was cool because it incentivizes, right, that that when one project wins, everyone wins. And having the other mechanism that co-create has, where you actually have to stake, or put some skin in the game, and in order to even like submit a proposal to create an NFT project, means that you do get, I think, a great level of like regulation, so that might kind of safeguard from people just spamming stuff, leveraging the co-create platform itself.
Yeah, I've always been, I mean, it's nervous when you read it, like, oh, I could potentially be slashed and not get my money back for proposing this idea. But on the flip side of that, yeah, it incentivizes you to be really thorough with your idea. Like, make sure you're presenting it as best you can. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but you got money. Put your money where your mouth is. It changes a lot. Here's a quick anecdote. I was talking to a doctor at the beginning of the pandemic, and they had opened up the telehealth stuff because that's what you had to do at the time. Right. They took a lot of their appointments through telehealth, but eventually they got overrun by it because there was no fee to use it. So they just imposed. They just said, it wasn't actually like a thing the insurance company said. They just slapped a $20 fee on it. It was like, if you want a telehealth, it's $20, and it just cut their volume down by half because
I'm sure
paying will definitely throttle a lot of people at the gate, which is nice. It's interesting though, like if you think about the DAO of DAOs as the umbrella and the investment from venture capitalists, it does make me wonder now again, who's going to own majority of that CO token? I mean, it'll probably be, I'm sure a lot of it goes to those backers. So they'll probably have more power over the overall protocol. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, because eventually, if they don't, then they've basically built the thing that will outdo them.
Yeah, and that's a great point, right? And I was wondering that as well, as who is going to be that initial token one, and how do you distribute that so that it is fair and balanced, and you don't have some whale in there that has taken over and making all the decisions. And they don't talk much too about anywhere in here around like the liquidity structure for the CO tokens, and how that initial pool is going to be created and how much is going to go into that, which I also think could in turn be like, I wonder too, is like, so if you have this like DAO of DAOs, right, does that it's another vulnerability point, right? Whether someone tries to drain the liquidity, get a 51% attack. Like, I wonder if in your mind, it has upside, but do you think that there's like equal potential risk downside from it?
I think one of my really well, he's like, everyone wants the excitement of like, oh, I can basically be my own bank now, but like now the responsibility of like, I gotta be my own bank now. So yeah, the liquidity pool thing is interesting. When you start talking about, I think it's in the conclusion. I just scrolled to it. It says which they talk about spiritually. It's similar to Uniswap, which introduce a new pattern around that, and then create a factory method to create new instances of the pools. And that's true, but you still have to fund the pool and make sure that it is balanced well. We've seen those things get dominated by whales before, and really like throw off some, or just have rug pulls too. That's the other part of it. So there's a lot to consider there. And when we start thinking about businesses at this level, Another thing people don't consider is like, oh yeah, I mean, I can go create a wallet right now. Even if I went and got a Ledger wallet, I could create it and just like have it on my computer. But there's a lot more custody that you should think about having involved that companies like BitGo and Copper handle
Hmm.
for like, okay, well, there's like sub wallets and some of them can't send more than a certain amount, or you have to have a multi-sig from certain people before transactions can happen because you're operating a massive wallet from a business level. And so while Co-Create solves a lot of these things in terms of getting off the ground, there's still a bunch of other stuff tangential to it, and not the least of which is funding the liquidity pools.
Right.
So there's a lot involved outside of just what Co-Create is offering. Yeah.
Yeah, and like honestly, I didn't even think about that of funding the liquidity pool of the individual tokens itself each time a new one of these is created. Like, and that might lead back to you know, whenever you are putting up or proposing a new you know, NFT project, like what that criteria is for being voted in. Like, do you need to provide some way to have liquidity for the tokens? Do you need to have a go to market strategy? Do you need to present your business, you know, business plan? I don't know. Like
Yeah.
what
I
that voting mechanism will be or
yeah,
criteria.
it'll be interesting, especially early on, because it'll be mostly from the creators of Co-Create and the backers of that that'll be the gateholders of like letting those first few projects in. They'll probably do it behind the scenes anyway, just so they can seed the thing with a few projects.
Mm-hmm,
But yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I hadn't considered that. That'll be. I
Do you
mean, it's yeah, it's like deal flow. You want to say yes to some things. You can't say no to everything.
right, yeah. And like I wonder too, like would it be like, do you think they would open up to like it to migration, like to existing projects, like in some form migrating into the Co-Create ecosystem?
So I was actually just thinking, if Co-Create gets some kind of relationship with any exchange, any project built on top of Co-Create would theoretically have a much faster path to acceptance
Yeah.
on that exchange. So they could theoretically get like the Coinbase bump or whatever for being offered in a place in a much faster way. So I can see them using that as a way to lure people in. And you said migration, and that's a great way to do it. So hey, you have this project today. What if you migrated to Co-Create and fast tracked your project to getting into a major exchange?
Yeah, I that's a great question. I don't know that.
I'm totally speculating, like this
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
I'd love to kind of like try to read the crystal ball and then Elon Musk tweets something. And I'm like, well, I was way off.
That there goes my whole strategy. It is gone.
Yeah, exactly. It's over. Yeah.
The Elon Musk effect. No, that's it. I mean, but I wondering too, like, so if we take a step back, right, and we look at this from 5,000 feet. I mean, do you see as what Co-Create's doing is like a positive thing, or like, do you think this is good? Do you align with it? What are your
Yeah, definitely. I would say that early on when we were thinking about other open source projects we could start to tackle outside of that open source NFT marketplace, having a DAO on Rails, which is sort of the elevator pitch for it, was
Yeah.
something that was really interesting. You start to peel back the layers of it and you realize, wow, there's a lot there. I think we just covered a bunch of it. There's a lot just outside of the actual protocol itself. What I think is really interesting is that, oh, well, apparently that idea, the core idea in its own, was enough worthy of an investment. Maybe we should have done something with that. And so that's okay. But I do think that, I can't wait to see how these things snap together. I even mentioned basic attention token before, and that whole ecosystem is similar. It's like, here's a token for you to use at your disposal for your projects. Like they're already using it for advertising, but you could use it for something else, for micropayments for a video or subs or whatever, like a Patreon replacement, something like that. So I think it'll be interesting to see how people like mold Co-Create over time. But I want to see how people compete with it.
yeah.
That's the cool thing when people like do something a little different. Yeah, but Links DAO is one that I always refer to for people who like might not quite understand the space, and they say they poured all their money into this to buy these NFTs representing membership levels of a golf course that does not exist yet. All that money that went into the treasury is going to be used to buy a golf course that they all get to vote on as a collective. And this kind of Co-Create thing could create so many of those Links DAO type of projects. And I don't golf, but someone I know who wasn't into NFTs at all and does golf was like, I gotta have one. So like,
Right.
it really flipped the switch for someone. If you can hit something that they appreciate that really speaks to them, and it doesn't even have to be a physical thing in the real world, I think that more people will be involved in the space earlier on. In the same way we saw people kind of evolve from the cash grab to more realistic kind of projects, we'll see the same thing from retail customers. They'll start to warm up and they'll start to understand this a little bit more.
Yeah, that's. I mean, so you frame that really well because at the end of the day, I've sent similar sentiments in that like the security of the repeatability that provides, especially from the smart contract level up, and that ability to provide some level of guidance and structure around like, look, if you're going to do a community, this is how you should set it up. Here's some suggested rate payout ratios that you should do to drive certain different behaviors from it. And if you kind of and I think that's the really interesting part in the Web3 space is like there is no playbook for success.
Yep.
Like if you do stuff in Web2, it's pretty figured out of if you do this and you do it well, like odds are you'll be successful. We don't have that yet.
Yeah.
And hoping that this will provide some of that template, right? So that as these new organizations or new DAOs come up,
That's a
it'll be
great. That's a really good point. Like Web 2 is more like, hey, now we have some data real time, and that comes in a variety of factors. And that's what the backbone of that was. But no wonder all these investors are crazy. It's because the playbook for making it successful could be literally anything. And we don't know what it is yet. And we're just scratching the surface because there are so many different pieces of it that when you stripe them together in a different way, it's going to make different music. You know what I mean? And who knows what's going to come out the other side. We're going to see some pretty cool things coming out of this space. I like that. You just jazzed me up. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, I mean, even on the investor front, right? It's that I wonder if a lot of them are taking that perspective of we'll spread the bets, and if we hit on what that model is that is successful, which kind of what Yu-Gi-Oh Labs did, what Bored Apes have done, is like that is the successful metric. But I mean, if you figure out what that is, you've made it.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone has it. Maybe this will be it.
I wonder if I think the thing that Bored Apes will miss in the long run is that the community that they've garnered is more about it's like rich celebrities and the other people who might be in that space. Like rich celebrities already know how to talk to other rich celebrities. They already have a communication network they work within on their own. They don't need like a special Discord server channel to be able to do that or exclusive parties to get into. I think it's the other people who probably want to be in that world that are excited about that space. When we see, I mean, I go back to the Links DAO thing. It's a very centered kind of like, hey, do you love golf enough that you would buy a membership ahead of time for something that doesn't exist? Well, yeah, apparently a lot of people would. And so we'll see probably more of those things. And you mentioned earlier, for better or for worse, maybe it'll be, illegal activity. Maybe it won't. But at least with Co-Create, you have to propose those ideas to the community. So ideally, you'll be able to stifle anything that would be harmful for the community.
Right. Yeah. Which is very. I'm very fascinated, very interested to see how this turns out. And to the Bored Apes, I always imagine like, does Paris Hilton or does Serena Williams have Discord downloaded on their phone? Like, odds are I can't see them just chatting in the general channel, GM.
Yeah. I can see like Paris Hilton has been surprising me more and more the more I dig into her, but she's a rare one-off. I would find it hilarious though if she just got in there, it's like that's hot, and just like left, just like never came back ever again.
Yeah, right. Stop being poor. Whatever sure it was that one time.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. No, that would be amazing. Well, man, I appreciate the time so much today, dude. This was a great conversation.
Great. Yeah, I loved it. And when you pitched this to me, I hadn't actually heard of it yet, so it was great to look into it, and I didn't realize how new it really was. So this is like cutting edge stuff here if you're listening to this right now. And honestly, if you're listening to this within the next 2 years, it's probably still really cutting edge stuff. So check it out.
It is. Awesome, man. Well, I will catch you on the next one. We'll start doing some of these again. Would love to have you back.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Adios, my friend.
See you, man.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, this was a deep dive into the Co-Create protocol. This is, as Brandon said, super new stuff. So if you want to learn more, we will be linking the white paper and their Medium article and their site down in the comments below, so you can investigate on your own, come up with your own conclusions, and let us know in the comments if you think that we were spot on or how you see this kind of playing out for the future. And with that, Keith, run your outro.